Okay, YouTube, in this video what we're going to do is practice how we can use a graphing utility in order to help us evaluate function combinations. That is to say that if we're given two functions f and g, so we have these two functions here, f and g, if we were to say add them together or subtract them apart, so f plus g of x or f minus g of x, could we find a y value at a given x value? That is, if I plugged in 3, could I find a value? And do so on a calculator. So what we're going to do is this. In order to do this on a calculator, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to y equals. And we're going to put in each of these functions in for y1 and y2. So for our square root function, let's go ahead and start with that. Go ahead and type in your square root of x. And for y2, we'll hit enter. We get the square root of 20 minus x to the second power n parenthesis. And so what we end up with here, suppose if we graph this, is just a couple of graphs. There's one square root graph, our parent square root graph, and then this semicircular region right here. So what we're going to do is this. We want to use this calculator to find f plus g of x, f minus g of x, and f g of x when x is equal to 3. So in other words, here's what we mean. We want to find f plus g of 3. And we want to find f minus g of 3, and we want to find f times g of 3. And the wonderful thing about this is that we just need to recognize that f plus g of 3 is the same thing as f of 3 plus g of 3. Likewise here, f minus g of 3 will be f of 3 minus g of 3. And then lastly, we would say that this last one here, f g of 3 would be f of 3 times g of 3. And so at each individual x value, we're just finding the sum difference or product of those two y values. So in terms of the calculator, here's where we're going to head. Instead of the graphs, we want to go to, right behind graph, it says table. So we're going to hit second graph. And what you'll see here is this. You're seeing all of the y values at each individual x value for your square root function. And you're seeing all of the y values at each individual x value for your square root of 20 minus x squared function. So for y1 and y2, which are these two here respectively, I'll go back to table. What we can do is we can just scroll down to 3, and what we're really doing is adding these two values together. Okay, those two values right there. So if I were to add 1.7321, so I'm going to quit. 1.7321 plus, now I'll go back into my table, and that was plus 3.3166. So 3.3166. 3.3166. Then we would have added f of 3 plus g of 3, and what we get is approximately 5.0487. So about 5.0487. Okay. Likewise, down here with f of 3 minus g of 3, we could just turn this situation around and we could say, look, in our table here, we know f of 3 is this 1.7321. So I'm going to write that down, 1.7321-ish, minus now what we get is about 3.3166, so 3.3166. And so we get approximately, when we subtract these, I'll hit quit. So we have, let's go back up here and we'll change this to a subtraction. We get about negative 1.5845, negative 1.5845-ish. Okay. So now for this last one, the product of the two, what we can do is we can just go back and we can multiply these two values together, because from our table we can see that f of 3 is this, g of 3 is this, so f of 3 times g of 3 would be the product of these two things. So I'll go back here and I'll change this to a multiply. We say the product of those two things is approximately 5.7446. But in other words, we just evaluated one piece at a time. So make sure you use that table function by first putting both of your functions in to your y equals, and then heading over to the table to see what the y values are at each individual x value and what their sums, differences, or products are. Cheers.